Talk a little bit about Roseanne going on Bill Mahr, and that might sound like a thing you shouldn't care about, but the fact of the matter is it's illustrative of the entire conversation between the left and the right now. So let's just go ahead and I hope you got your coffee cup ready to rock and roll. Let's tear into this. All right, good morning. Hope everybody's got their cup of coffee ready to rock and roll. On this beautiful Tuesday morning, Taco Tuesday, and I take Taco Tuesday very seriously because, frankly, there's $1 tacos around the corner, and when you have as many kids as I do, it's fiscally irresponsible to ignore that deal. So, what we're talking about this morning is conspiracy theories and kind of the trajectory of the conspiracy theory over the last several years. There has been a prevailing narrative on social media and in mass media generally that a rise in dangerous conspiracy theories are undermining, most especially American trust in government. But let's be real. They're undermining trust in government all around the world. We saw the yellow umbrella protests in China, centered around questions of sovereignty and fair dealing. And those, a big part of the reason that they had the yellow umbrellas there, they would carry the yellow umbrellas and hold them up to hide themselves from cameras because, total surveillance state. Now, we have a lesser degree of surveillance state in this country, but only kind of insofar as the government doesn't directly control quite as many cameras. So in China, you've got more public facing closed circuit TV cameras recording the public at all times than you do in the United States. Now, in the U.S., however, and this is true all over the world. We've talked about how we all bought our own Big Brother. You've got those cameras just streaming data to the internet globally, constantly. So the our kind of bulwark in the States is somebody has to actively go out and source from the global surveillance infrastructure of the social media phenomenon of people just actively streaming everything that's going on around them. So there is a layer of anonymity retained there, but not a very good one. But you look at the conspiracy theories, right? And of course, the big conspiracy theories that are popular for discussion currently are the nature of the security of the 2020 election, the nature and extent of the corruption of the Biden family, with regard to Hunter Biden's activity, essentially money laundering and influence peddling around the world. You look at these, and what sets them apart from conspiracy theories of the past is the publicly available evidence to support the claims. Now, Pitt Danny says conspiracy theory is a made-up word for information they don't want out. You're close, Danny, but let me explain the real fact of the matter on this. The term conspiracy theory does not itself presuppose the falsity of a claim. Now, on the other side of that, neither does it presuppose the veracity of a claim. Just because a thing is or is called a conspiracy theory does not, in and of itself, by dint of it being called a conspiracy theory, guarantee or vitiate the veracity of the claim. There are two words there that are important: conspiracy and theory. Conspiracies are a thing. Conspiracies do in fact happen. And a conspiracy can be as simple as a conspiracy to commit murder, right? You got a hot young thing that marries an aging billionaire, and she hires an assassin to take out the billionaire so that she can go ahead and collect her payout early, go ahead and get her inheritance early. That's a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy to commit murder. That's a crime that people get charged with, right? You get more than one person involved in a crime, and that is a conspiracy. One such crime is the crime of defrauding the American people, right? It is a crime to defraud someone. It is a massive crime to defraud the entire population of a country. And there's a reason that there's a separate charge in the event that a group of people have taken action to defraud an entire population. There is an additional separate charge for the work of conspiring to defraud the American people, right? For example, a good example of a conspiracy to defraud the American people is all of a sudden you have a bunch of DAs that nobody's ever heard of who come out with spurious and unsupportable charges against a current frontrunner in a presidential election cycle, right? What's going on with Jack Smith and Fani Willis, and I believe under the direction of the DOJ and the Biden administration, based on the evidence surrounding their other clear activities. Crackshot mentioned Soros DAs. The fact that they are all politically funded and supported by not just Soros. There are several organizations, many of which are also Soros backed, but there are several organizations that commonly fund these obviously these obviously politically partisan hacks who are engaged in a clear and obvious conspiracy to defraud the American people and a conspiracy to tamper in the 2024 election. But you go back and you look at the history of conspiracy theories, And what makes the conspiracy theories we're talking about today so much more believable is that they're very vanilla compared to conspiracy theories of the past, which have, to any reasonable person's amazement, turned out to be true. Right? The title of this episode, right, from the thumbnail is MK Ultra didn't Epstein the Gulf of Tonkin. MK Ultra, the Gulf of Tonkin, and then Epstein. Right? There were several conspiracy theories that were outlandish that have now proved to be true. MK Ultra is the name of a program about which there was a long-running conspiracy theory that the federal government of the United States of America ran programs to experiment with the use of LSD, hallucinogenics, in order to create remote viewers, psychic spies, people who could take hallucinogenic drugs, go into a sort of meditative, transcendental mental state and psychically spy on our enemies. And the evidence is out now. There's no longer it's no longer a conspiracy theory. The MK Ultra program did happen. It did occur. The U.S. government did run these experiments. They ran some of those experiments on criminals, on inmates against their will. They ran some of those experiments on college students in voluntary experimental programs. And we know all this. This is all declassified public information now. But just 15, 20 years ago, you sounded like a crackpot nut job if you started talking about MK Ultra. But it happened. And the conspiracy theory, like I said, it's a theory. You look at some evidence and you form a theory, right? You look at the evidence that the Hunter Biden laptop contained evidence implicating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden in foreign corruption. We've seen some of that evidence, and we form a theory that there was a conspiracy involving Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and the numerous foreign entities named in the documents from the laptop, which included emails, bank records, etc. And it's not unreasonable to form a theory, and the formation of a reasonable theory based on available evidence is a good reason to explore the theory and test its veracity. MK Ultra turned out to be true, a true conspiracy theory. The Gulf of Tonkin, right? A fabricated incident that was crafted to incite our involvement in the Vietnam War. We now know fully that the Pearl Harbor incident, we were forewarned, and our government could have taken action to prevent that particular disaster, and intentionally chose not to. Chose to allow the attack to occur and not take action on the intelligence available for the purpose of excusing our entry into World War II. Right? There is just a plethora of these that until just 20 years or so ago were crackpot conspiracy theories. Nobody in their right mind would have really believed it, right? Or so we're told. And then, time passes, documents get declassified, and we know, oh no, some shit went down, right? We know the story at Ruby Ridge. The FBI conducted a conspiracy to extort a man into, they tried to trick him into committing crimes in order that they could use the threat of prosecution for minor crimes, right? Basically possessing a sawed-off shotgun, in order to attempt to extort him into becoming an inside informant into a group of political dissidents that the FBI was targeting. And we know now that the FBI was built originally with the explicit intent of being the corrupt organization that it is. The FBI was never intended to be a law enforcement agency. It was always intended to be an agency designed to target, disrupt, and prosecute and persecute dissident organizations, right? Everything from the KKK to the Black Panthers. The FBI exists to basically prevent Americans from using their First Amendment rights in order to combat an ever more tyrannical government from growing ever more tyrannical. And you fast forward to today, it was just a few years ago that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. And when that happened, when Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself, right, when Jeffrey Epstein was obviously murdered right after an incident where there was an obvious attempted murder by a former law enforcement officer who had turned criminal with a I can't remember the guy's name. It was like Tormolino or something. He had a name that sounded like it was right out of a bad mafia movie, and he was a Clinton associate. And he attempted to murder Jeffrey Epstein, and then just a week or three later, Epstein actually was murdered. And no reasonable person looks at Jeffrey Epstein being found hanged, having hanged himself in his cell, while it just happens that literally every security camera on the cell block happened to glitch out, happened to not be recording at the same time that the security guards happened to be distracted by some other activity, right? It turns out that the story was something like they were shopping on the internet, and they shouldn't have been. They were derelicting their duty. I'm like, yeah, and everybody's asking the question, well, how much were they paid to go shopping on the internet for those particular 15 minutes? The Epstein's situation. We still haven't seen the client list. We've seen, what's her face? Ghislaine Maxwell. We've seen her convicted of the crimes that we all know that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in, and there's still no client list. And a lot of us are still out here saying, hey, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for the crime of selling slaves to sexual predators. She had a client list. The list exists. Why in the hell are we not prosecuting everybody on that list? Right? Crackshot points out Fauci just happened to be working in the Wuhan labs before the coup in 2020. That's another one, right? The Chinese lab leak, Fauci's involvement, the U.S. funding of the COVID virus, right? None of these are nearly as outlandish as the conspiracy theory that the federal government ran a psychic spy program, right? So we go from the federal government is using magic to conduct secret wars, and holy shit, that's a real thing, to you'd have to be crazy to believe that Joe Biden has any corruption at all. Never mind that he shut down the XL pipeline, immediately shifted all that money to a different pipeline in the Eastern Bloc in Europe, which just happened to be the funding that Putin needed to invade the Ukraine, which just happened to be the excuse that Biden, who, let me back up again real quick, who funded the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that just happened to be the excuse that the DNC needed to launder more tax money into the Ukraine through foreign aid, back into political contributions, into the DNC, and back into the pockets of the same corrupt bureaucrats that funded that war to begin with. They're funding both sides of that war. And if it ever occurred to you that if you ever thought for a moment that that's not something we do, let me remind you of the Mujahideen and how essentially the work of Charlie Wilson funding and equipping the Mujahideen in conflict with Russian foreign invaders attempting to gain territorial footholds in Afghanistan was the inciting incident that created the Taliban, which we armed and funded before we then deposed them and went in to set up ostensibly to democratize Afghanistan, only to later, when it was convenient politically for a Democrat, to completely botch the pullout, sacrificing American lives for the explicit purpose of making a political show in support of the same Chinese corruption that Biden has been using to fund his other corrupt activities through the corrupt use of his son. When somebody says conspiracy theory, and they say it like it's a dirty word that means that it just automatically debunks whatever the theory is, that person is ill-informed. So, I'm going to switch over a little bit now and I'm going to talk about Bill Maher. Because Roseanne Barr went on the show with Bill Maher the other day, and this is essentially illustrative of the problem with the conversation and what it is that actually causes the Overton window to slip further and further to the left. Quite simply, the further left your politics go, the less likely it is that you are informed on anything, right? Forget about getting deep in the woods, deep into the weeds on conspiracy theories and worrying about the World Economic Forum under Klaus Schwab and George Soros, trying to deprivatize all of your property so that you live in the pods and eat the bugs. Forget even getting deep in the woods and understanding, what the conspiracy theories are and how much blindingly obvious evidence there is to support them. Bill Maher famously had Dennis Prager on his show, and Prager talked about, this was several years ago, when the trans issue was just first starting to take over, right after Obergefell, and Prager talked about about public schools putting tampon dispensing machines in boys' bathrooms, and said this is a forward sign, essentially, that they're planning to move on the trans issue hard, and the result is going to be the mutilation and sterilization of children. And Mahr was like, that's not happening anywhere. And yes, 100% it was in fact happening, and 100%, just like Prager predicted at the time, that was kind of a canary in the coal mine for the direction of all this additional psychosis, which has further infected our cultural touchstones. It's destroyed the movie industry. Filmmaking has turned into just a joke, barely a shadow of itself. So let's watch this clip from Bill Maher. I think I've got the sound working this time, guys. So let me know if you're.
No wonder I don't remember this.
No shit, you blocked it out, MK Ultra.
Who's that?
That's the mind control program you're under, Bill.
MK Ultra?
Yeah.
So who's Klaus Schwab?
The head of the WEF.
What's that?
Google it.
Hey, he knows nothing, right? The man has been a professional political commentator for what, 40 years, 30 years? And he's completely uninformed on, okay, like I said, forget about the deeper conspiracy theory stuff. If you're a professional commentator on world politics, how do you not know what the WEF is? Right. Now, I understand if your average Joe citizen doesn't understand or isn't aware of what the World Economic Forum is. Kind of. But, I mean, talk to just a random person, right? They're going to know what the UN is. They're going to know what NATO is, right? They're not going to know the details. They're going to tell you, oh, the UN is the United Nations. It's basically a big world peace club. Okay, okay, fair. That's ostensibly the public face of what we're supposed to understand them to believe. At least you've heard of the thing, right? World Economic Forum, same kind of a thing. You know, World Health Organization. These are things that just in passing you should at least ostensibly have heard of. Bill Maher is. He was a darling of the left for quite some time, and he's had some moments. He's had some good moments recently where he's made statements about statements against censorship, statements in support of the First Amendment. There was the incident where he had Ben Affleck on, and so I don't remember who it was that was on with him, but they said something about Islamic terrorists. And Ben Affleck just lost his shit, like, oh, how dare you? To suggest that terrorists could be Islamic is just entirely racist. Like, oh, what? Right? And, you know, that's one of those where you can't be this stupid. Right? That statement, that's another great example of that kind of thinking is when Donald Trump essentially intimated that among the criminal aliens entering this country, there are murderers, drug dealers, and rapists. And the press ran with, Donald Trump says that all Mexicans are murderers, drug dealers, and rapists. No, that's a false statement. That's a lie. When we talk about fake news, that's it right there. Because what he said was, among this group of people, there are these categories as well. That is a big difference between saying all of these people are also all of these other things. Huge difference. But what is not distinguishable, when you criticize illegitimately in that manner, then you're making the claim, because he was accused of being a racist for saying what he said, you're making the claim that no Mexicans can possibly be rapists, murderers, and drug dealers. And that is also psychotic. That's insane. That would let's take for a moment. Let's say for a moment that you are a total white supremacist and you believe in the absolute superiority of the white race. Can you, even in that mental state, pretend as if Charles Manson does not exist? Right? Because if your claim is that white people are so superior in every way, which necessarily includes morality and ethicality, then part of your assertion, which is clearly unintelligible, is that people like Charles Manson do not exist. Right? And to be charitable, in fact, it's reasonable to compare that making the claim that among black men between the ages of 18 and 40, the majority of all violent crime is committed by that category, by that demographic. And a large majority, some like 70% of all violent crime is committed by that demographic exclusively. That is not the same. That is not the same claim as to say that all blacks are criminals. But to reject the claim that 18 to 40-year-old black men, and I don't know the exact numbers there, but commit the majority of crimes, to reject that claim categorically as racist is to assert that there are no black criminals. And that is incoherent. That's not a claim that can be supported. But right there, Roseanne and Bill Mahr very nicely illustrate the substantial difference between the two narratives. And I want to be very fair about this.
No wonder I
analysis.
don't remember this.
No shit, you blocked it out, MK Ultra.
Okay, it's weird that she calls him MK Ultra because MK Ultra was not a person, it was a group and organization. But in a colloquial fashion, it's more of an accusation than a personal address, and that's reasonable. And if you've seen any of Roseanne's other interviews, I want to be perfectly fair here. Roseanne clearly has a broad lexicon of kind of top-level, low-resolution list of conspiracy theories into which she has not spent a great deal of time on researching the particulars and the details. So she references MK Ultra, WEF, George Soros in this conversation. And those are all good things to know about if you want to know what's going on in the world. But simply being aware that those things exist is not a sufficient quantity of information to make informed, intelligent actions on the basis of. But that very, very nicely between the two of them illustrates the difference and the problem of the intelligence and the information level of both sides. On the right, we tend to be aware of more stuff, even if our understanding of the individual items doesn't go much below the surface of the items. But on the left, they're unaware. They're completely unaware that there are even those facts to explore. Right? That's how you end up with groups like Gays for Palestine. That's like Jews for Auschwitz. Gays for Palestine, Jews for Palestine. Right? That's like that's like a Black Klansman, right? The Black Klansman. Such an obvious oxymoron that there have been at least two extremely famous incidents of comedies based on that, right? Dave Chappelle famously did a sketch about a blind black man who was a member of the Klan. Right, and he divorced when he found out he was black. He had to divorce his wife because she was an N-word lover, right? And that was good comedy. That was funny. That was hilarious, right? And then there was the film Black Klansman, which if I never saw it. I probably won't. Not my cup of tea, but it was a popular film. It did very well, and largely it's a comedy based on the ridiculous premise of. If I understand the synopsis correctly, basically there's a black, some sort of police officer, detective, investigator who goes undercover to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan, which of course on the face of it is ridiculous. That, you know, that would be like me being sent to China or Korea as an intelligence agent with the expectation that I'm going to blend into the population. Like, I'm huge in China. Or Japan, or Korea, right? Anywhere that the average man is 5'6", I'm a foot taller than you, sunshine. And Jaga American accented Hanguk Marl isn't gonna fool Nadian. Chin Cha Yo. Which would make for an excellent piece of comedy. So, the interview itself very neatly illustrates the significant divide in intelligence and awareness between both sides. And to be clear, I am making a critique here also of the right and the habit of the low information right-wing voter to have a large overview of low resolution information into which they have not done a great deal of investigation. And so they're still generally unaware. Frankly, if you've got a low resolution understanding of the existence of the World Economic Forum, George Soros, the WHO, the interactions between those organizations, and the damage that is resulted from and expected to result from those continued conspiracies moving forward into the future, you are missing a lot of the really important information that should terrify you and should inform you on more specific intervention type activities that we need to be involved in. But if you're on the left, you stay on the left precisely because you're completely blind to the psychopathy of the global conspiracies. Right? Because let's not mix any bones about it. If you don't understand the extent and the substantiality of the various global conspiracies that we tend to discuss, the tangible, visible results of those are there is more slavery in the world today than at any point in the history of the world. That slavery includes the acquisition of your rare earth minerals for the production of things like your iPhone, and to a much greater degree, your electric vehicles, your alternative fuel machines. That slavery includes the Uyghur concentration camps in China, which we know from documents and from photographic and journalistic evidences are being used as organ harvesting operations to supply black market transplant organs to the world, right? The Falun Gong, a religiously persecuted organization in China, where, again, people are being harvested from the religious organization by the Chinese Communist Party to produce black market organ transplant donors involuntarily. The child sex trafficking business that is alive and well in the United States as well as the rest of the planet. The return of open air slave markets in parts of North and West Africa. If you are not tracking on the high resolution stuff like the existence of the World Economic Forum, then, my friend, you are actively supporting, with your vote and your voting dollars, the perpetuation of, at the basest level, slavery. Which, let's not make any mistake about this, slavery is the prime objective of communism. The whole point to communism is to create a world of slaves ruled by a small class of authoritarians. And that's where we are. That's what you're voting against next year when you vote for Donald Trump. You're voting against the rise of slave masters like Joe Biden. So, thanks for watching this morning. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope I got a couple of chuckles out of you considering the weight of the subject matter. But I appreciate y'all watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.